Hi there! Welcome to this month's edition of Greenbelt Nature Crafts with Angel. And that's me. I am Angel Ehlers. And it is spring. And so since it's spring, we've been seeing lots of different things happening, especially the beautiful flowers from many of our plants blossoming in the park. And it got me really inspired, and it made me think that it would be a perfect time to bring this particular craft to you. And it is very easy, and I'm really excited that we're going to be learning how to make a field flower press. And it may not look like much, really, but it is a really great tool for you to take out into the field with you. A field flower press is much smaller and simpler than some of the other flower presses that you may be familiar with, and that's why it's the one that we're going to start with. It's kind of your introduction to understanding what a flower press is and how it can be used. But this one in particular is designed to be small so that you can easily put it in your backpack when you're going out into the field when you might encounter some beautiful flowers that you want to preserve. One of the first flower presses, in my opinion, was probably one of the heaviest books that a person found in their house. So this was one of the heaviest books that I could find, and it is coincidentally a book about wildflowers. But the idea of a flower press is that you want to add weight and pressure to the flower. You'll put it in the middle. Weight and pressure, keep the sunlight out, absorb the moisture, leave it in there for a couple of weeks, and voila, it will be preserved. Some flower presses can be as simple as this one here that I made. Just pieces of recycled cardboard, stacked together, cut to the same size, with different flowers preserved in between. And with something like this, or with your field flower press, you can just add books on top of it. So if you stack them and have your top piece like this, and you need to add extra weight, you can just add something on top and make sure it stays there and does not move. Little more advanced flower press that I made, which is basically the exact same idea as your field flower press, but bigger, is this one here that is held together with straps. It has one piece of wood on top and then alternating layers of cardboard, cardstock, newspaper, flowers, newspaper, cardstock, cardboard, and over again until you have all the layers that you want. And again, once you put your flowers inside and make sure they're nice and flat in there, you would secure it and keep the pressure on. In this event, with this kind of flower press, you wouldn't need to add a book on top, but you could if you wanted to. A more advanced flower press is like this one right here. And this one is the exact same idea again, with the wood on the outside and the layers of cardboard and paper on the inside. But this one, instead of using straps or rubber bands, actually uses wing nuts. So why would we want to press and preserve flowers anyway? I can think of a few reasons, and I've made lots of craft projects with the pressed flowers themselves, and I'll show you some examples of those in a few minutes. But a really good reason to press and preserve flowers is so that we are actively collecting data about the different plants that can be found in our local areas, whether it's our backyard or our park or wherever we might find wildflowers. So, as you can see in this book, lots of people work really hard to collect this information so that everybody knows how these different populations might change over time. There are some wildflowers that are found here in the Greenbelt that weren't found here 50 years ago. And on the other end, there are some wildflowers that were here and very prolific 50 years ago that just can't be found anymore. So when you're going out into the park or wherever you're going to identify your wildflowers, it's a really great idea to bring with you a pocket guide along with your field press. I really like this one. This is the National Geographic Pocket Guide, and I like it because of its really vivid pictures. It has really nice illustrations. It tells you how to identify these plants based on their various characteristics. At various museums and cultural institutions, there's often an archivist on staff, and the Staten Island Museum just last year had a really amazing exhibit about the different native plants and flowers that could be found on Staten Island. And you can be sure that the person who put that together had a really impressive industrial level flower press on hand that somebody made for the express purpose of perfectly preserving these specimens so that people could learn from them for years to come. For my own purposes, as you know, I love nature and I love to craft. So pressing and preserving flowers is a really special activity for me. I get to save some of the really beautiful blossoms and leaves that are found through different times of the year, and then integrate those into different craft projects. And the possibilities are really limitless, but some of the things that I have done with pressed flowers is I have framed them and made pictures out of them. I have painted with them. I have made candles with them, and I've decorated furniture with them. But that's just where it begins. Your imagination can take you wherever you want with your pressed flowers. All right, so now that we know what we're gonna make, let's look at the different materials that we'll need to make it. Starting with something called hardboard. Not cardboard with a C, but hardboard with an H. If you picked up a bag, you picked up hardboard that I cut in half and broke, so you could do the same thing if you did not pick up materials. You'll need a ruler to measure everything, a pencil to make your markings, scissors to cut out your measured cardstock. Cardstock is just like printer paper, but it is thicker. You're also going to need some newspaper and some rubber bands. So with not so very many materials, you're going to be able to make something really, really cool. Let's get started. Like we said, our flower press is going to be different layers of these same materials. So we're going to have hardboard, cardstock, newspaper, cardstock, hardboard. But you'll do more layers of the papers in between so that you have more spaces to press your flowers. And we're going to start out by measuring our hardboard. So we're going to get ready to do a little bit of math and see how long our hardboard is. And it looks like this piece is exactly 8 inches long. And how wide is it? Looks less wide than 8 inches. Looks like 5 inches wide. So why is this measurement important? Well, that's the measurement that we're going to be making and cutting on our cardstock and newspaper. Of course, you don't have to measure it because you have a template right here. You could take the template and line it up on your paper perfectly with the right angles meeting each other, and then just trace your template on the outside. Or you could take your ruler and measure 5 inches in by 8 inches long. Now, do you think that we should just put one on this piece of paper, or do you think we can actually fit 2? I think we can fit 2. And that's an important point, because instead of coming in and tracing my hardboard right in the middle of the paper like that, I knew that I could make 2, so I positioned it perfectly to be able to do 2 of them. And if you do that, then you're being really economical with your space and really smart about your materials. We're going to want to do this on about 10 pieces of cardstock so that we have about 20 pieces of cut paper. And once you have your guidelines, you can start to cut. Now, I like to save scrap papers, so these strips on the edges, they'll just go into a little container where I save my scrap construction paper and cardstock and things like that, because maybe I'll be able to use them in the future. Now that we have cut out 20 of these 8x5 rectangles of cardstock, it's time to move on to our newspaper. But we need to know how many newspaper rectangles we need. We need double the amount of newspaper rectangles as we have of cardstock rectangles. So if we have 20 of these, then we need 2 times as much as that, then 20 times 2 is 40. So now we know that we will need 40 8x5 rectangles of newspaper. And we're going to do this in the exact same way that we did the cardstock. We can use a template again to make the marks on our newspaper so that we know where to cut. And again, I'm going to think about the shape of this newspaper and how I can get the most pieces out of it. Because we're using recycled newspaper, and so we might as well continue to be conscious of how much of these paper materials we use. So I see that I can make 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rectangles out of this one sheet. Depending on the newspaper that you have, it may be different, but just try to maximize your space and really think about how many you can get in each newspaper. Then you can trace them out. This does not have to be perfect, and you can trim them later on if you need to. And now we can get to cutting. The fun thing, or it can be fun if you pick the right kind of newspaper, is you can use comic book strips, or articles that you might want to remember in the future, so that as you continue to use your flower press years and years on into the future, you can revisit those same articles that maybe talk about your hometown, or about the sports that you like, or about the arts and culture that you like, or read the comic section, like I said. And that's kind of more fun than doing what I'm doing here, which is reading about the different coupons that you can redeem at local stores. And then one more fun thing is that since we're thinking about our materials and being as resourceful as possible, you can think about what other projects you can do with newspaper scraps. And I can think of a few projects like making paper mache or even recycled paper. So always think about the different pieces that you have left over and what you might be able to do with them. Now that we've cut all of the pieces that we need to size, it's time to assemble our flower press. And again, we're going to start kind of making a sandwich, with the hardboard being the bread and the other pieces of paper being what's in your sandwich. So it's going to go hardboard, cardstock, newspaper, newspaper, cardstock, newspaper, newspaper, cardstock. So that's always going to be 1 cardstock, 2 newspapers, 1 cardstock, 2 newspapers. And the reason that is because the more cushion that there is, and especially with the newspaper, it is helping to pull all of the moisture out of your flowers. Wow, that is perfect. We had just the right amount of everything. Then you can kind of make sure that they're all even. Put your top on. And of course we will need the mechanism to keep it nice and tight. And so since this is such a simple and small flower press, we're gonna actually use rubber bands. You could also use string if that's what you had, or like I said, you could just stack a book on top and that would work. And there you go. But now, what do we do with the flowers? Where do we find flowers? Well, I just went for a very short walk and I found a few flowers here that I would love to press and see how they preserve after a few weeks. So we have a dogwood tree flower, we have a white clover, and we have a dandelion. But I do see on my dogwood flower that there's a little friendly ladybug hitchhiker that I just want to make sure I do not press in the flower press. So always check your flower before you put it in there, because no one's going to really be able to survive in there with all that pressure. So what we're going to do is we're going to open it up and find our first sandwich between the two newspapers. So that's cardboard, cardstock, newspaper, and right in there is where we're going to press these flowers. You need to be careful because obviously these aren't flat to begin with, so you're going to have to figure out a way to make it flat. Whichever way you want this to preserve is the way you're going to do it. So I'm going to press, well, I guess I'm going to take that off. I could have tried a little harder to just press it flat, but that will work just great. Make sure that the petals are nice and evenly flat. I'm going to actually put the dandelion flower straight down like that because I have more control over it in that way. And then the clover is just going to go flat like that. And then we're going to take our top layers, make sure everyone is still behaving and staying straight down. Put our top layer right on top, give it a little press, and then add our rubber bands again. So if you were out on a hike or on a day in your backyard where you're preserving different flowers, you could go to different layers. Just make sure that you're putting those flowers between the two layers of newspaper. And then once you're done, you can basically sit it down in a nice dry place with some good air circulation for 3 to 4 weeks or longer, until when you take your flowers out, they are nice and hard, they're no longer moist, and they're ready to be saved and turned into some other craft project if you'd like. That's it. You've done it. You made your very own Greenbelt field flower press. And so now you're all ready to put this in your backpack with your field guide and go for a hike. Go see what you can find. Go in your backyard or on the sidewalk. You'd be amazed to see the different wildflowers that can be found just in the cracks of the sidewalk. So thank you so much for joining me today. And as always, if you want to take pictures of your unique craft process, I would love to see them. Please send them to us at sigreenbelteducation@gmail.com. And for all of your virtual and in-person programming needs, check us out at our website at sigreenbelt.org. We also have a YouTube channel, Facebook accounts, and an Instagram account to stay connected. Thank you so much. Happy crafting.